Today's the final video in the Flashforge USACreator Max 3D printing series. We're going to go into Tinkercad and we're going to custom design from scratch a sci-fi prop. Then we're going to print it, and then we're going to weather it, and then we are going to marvel in the awesomeness. How's it going? Anthony Ferraro here, Create Sci-Fi. Today is exciting. Today we're wrapping up the 3D printing series. Not 3D printing, but the initial sort of getting myself familiar with it. We've been very fortunate here on this channel to be sponsored by the amazing Flashforge USACreator Max 3D printer, right? It's a dual extruder. It's a really great printer. So far, we did the unboxing. I'll link to all these videos. So we did an unboxing and just a test print, and that was like totally me as a noob, as a novice. Then in the second video, I did some testing. I tried out the dual extruder. I did some test prints. I did some more complicated prints. And then I did a supplemental video where I did a kit bash of a blaster, which is, if you follow this channel, you know that's really in line with what we do here. So that was really exciting. So today, for the final video in this series, I wanted to take all that stuff that I learned and do a custom prop, right? So in my script that I'm working on now, there's a part here where it mentions that the main character has this little device. So you see that description. I thought this is a great opportunity to do something from scratch. So I go into Tinkercad. So here's a couple prototypes that I did. And the first problem I kept running into was I was really maximizing the surface of my print bed. And a lot of my prints were failing because I was just going way too far. So I ended up retooling the design. I made it into two pieces. Here's one of them. And then I put the two pieces together. I don't know if you can see this there on camera, but I did some like overhangs and things that really helped me with that. But getting ahead of myself, so let's go into Tinkercad. I'll design this, we'll build it, and then we'll weather it, and we'll have a final original 3D printed prop. Again, big shout out thanks to the Flashforge USACreator Max 3D printer. Wow, very exciting. All right, so let's get to building this custom prop. All right, so first we step into Tinkercad, and I'm gonna double time it here just because it's not a step-by-step. I wanna give you an overview. Tinkercad is free. I'll have links below. So now I'm just taking out boxes, right? Basic shapes. And that's all like 3D building is. Even when it's like complicated things, you're starting with basic shapes and then you're building. So here, to keep things simple, I'm just making just a simple box, right? I have this like calculator, sort of sci-fi device. We're not sure what it does, but it gives the actor something to do. And I'm custom making this because this is what I imagine in my head. I don't have to go shopping for bits and bobs, and I'm thinking about it here. So I also just go and get some basic objects on Thingiverse, which again I'll link to. And here, you know, I just searched computer keys, and you know, here's an interesting computer key. And you know, I just want to have, you know, just an array, kind of, you know, I'm thinking in my head like just a little bigger than something than like an accountant would use, right? So I'm thinking this is some kind of ship functionality thing, like a utility daily device. And you really want to give these things a backstory when you're building them. It just helps to sort of inform what your next step in the build is going to be. So here, you know, I have the space on the side, and then part of Tinkercad, there's these preset pieces. So here is sort of, you know, it's almost like a weird, like heat sink shape, right? And you always want to use, I find, familiar shapes in unfamiliar settings, right? So this is a heat sink looking piece. So we kind of have that in our memory. So it just looks like something. Now the thing with Tinkercad, because it's free and basic, you just can't slice things, right, too? So what I have to do here is find the middle, and then you're basically creating a hole, right? So you're cutting off one half, and then I'm gonna cut off in the model that because I duplicated this, I'm gonna cut off the other half. Now, you know, this seems maybe complicated, but, you know, the reality is, you know, it took me, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes one day to figure out this is how you do this. Whereas if I was in, like a real hardy pro program, like, like a CAD program, I don't even know if I would have figured out how to do this like on the fly, right? So that's why I kind of celebrate this as a simple solution. Eventually I want to learn like a real authentic hardy CAD 3D program. But for now, I have something in my mind. I want to get started, and this helps me, right? So now I'm just making adjustments. Again, it's all just cubes basically. And here, I have this lip, and it's really important. What I've learned is you really need to make it airtight, right? So like the base, you want that to be flat. You don't want there to be like, one of those rails to be higher than the other. And you don't want maybe in there where I add that model to be some kind of gap or something. You don't want that, right? So there, side by side, you see I have the two views. So now, that's what's cool about CAD is, it's all copy and paste, right? So I know for a fact that those two things are going to line up perfectly, right? And here I'm just sort of using the arrow key, and then you can get right in there and boom. And also, too, the better I get with Tinkercad, I'm sure there's some shortcut key that'll just bang line that right up. But again, this is, I've spent, just a half a day on this, and I'm already making stuff, right? So I've also learned in my other projects so far that when you slice something, it really helps to have some kind of registration to make sure that things go back together in a uniform way, and then it just also helps to lock things into place. So here I have these, they're like in woodworking, they're biscuits. So what I can do is put one set on the other side, and then on the other side, all I do is change that into a hole, and it cuts out a hole, and then that'll take that, and I know that this is going to fit. And again, all this I learned like on the fly. So, we're zipping through this. In the future, I think it might be worth it if enough people mention it to do just a step-by-step Tinkercad build. But, broken record, like I said, this is a great solution. Like, I'm doing this in less than a day, it's very well named, of tinkering around, and it's all very intuitive. And it's one of those platforms where you can Google pretty much any question you have, and then you can get an answer, right? So I think this is good. We got our model here. So now I'm going to work on the top, and up here, again, I'm just going into my little folder that I have with I basically just downloaded a bunch of 70s, 80s computer parts, right? And these are, I don't know, they're kind of like tab keys, I guess. And then I had this idea where, similar to I guess a soundboard, that I wanted to get these faders. So right now I'm searching for faders. And they're gonna magically appear right now. There they are. Okay, so these are, like sliders, right? Slider controls. And I don't know, this idea just popped into my head. And it's one of these things where you're just sort of improvising because you're telling the story. So here, this is a neat trick. So I found some text will give you a 3D thing. So this, I wanted to have these level meters, and these are just L's. So when you look at these faders, it's but you could be creative, and basically you're just thinking what shape would work here, right? So now I have that, and I'm looking at it, and now it's like details, right? It's like, okay, down here I think I'm going to need a few more buttons over here. Now these are just regular key buttons, but I scale them down. And what's cool here is the way I'm spacing everything. By shifting and dragging, the CAD program is doing the equidistance work for you, right? So as I drag those down, as I place them, the program is telling me, you know, stop here, stop here, stop here, and then that's going to be uniform, right? So then you start looking around and it's like, what else can I do? And then here's the part that really excites me. Now I'm going to add the logo. Now this logo is something that's going to be in all the props and all the costumes in this short film, right? So this is just one of those little details that really just takes it to the next level. So I've showed in other videos, and I can show a link below here, where you can take a JPEG and turn it into vector art, right? So here's my logo, and right there I'm turning it into a hole, so it does negative space. And now this little hand prop, you know, something that you'll see on screen for moments, or it'll just be on the side as almost like a set piece. It just, you know, it has this logo which ties it into the universe that I built. And I don't know, maybe I'm going on about this, but that is just huge to me. And, you know, it's the possibilities are endless, right? And even, you know, I could just print out a bunch of those logos, and if I went and did my, you know, my typical thrift store or dollar store prop build, I can incorporate that into that build, right? But for the purposes of this, I just wanted to build something from scratch, right? And then, you know, realistically, it's still not from scratch because, you know, I went and free sourced those buttons. But here it is. So now we got to go to the printer. And here's the cooking show portion of this definitely took like weeks, but there it is in a second. So now we're into the build. I have different versions of the pieces because, you know, I'm still learning printing. Some printed better than the others, so I'm just assessing. Now here you see where it pulled away from the bed and you get that slope, right? But that I think I'll be able to fix. And again, you know, it takes a long time to print these, so I'm sort of saying, okay, this is what I can work with. So now I'm just filing down. Remember, we made those tabs, and then this is off camera. I did adjust my model a little bit, and this is a slightly different version that's just a little thicker than that one we just built, right? But it's basically that bottom cube is deeper. It's a deep dish pizza now. All right, so now I'm just working these tabs, and because I'm again new to CAD building, you know, my tolerances were a little too tight, but I just removed a little material. But yeah, that's good. And then I have the overhang of the keys there, like I learned in my blaster model, where, you know, I want mechanical connections, and then those are going to help to hide the seam. So that I just super glued together, and yeah, that's looking good. That feels good, feels solid, feels like a prop. So now I got to deal with the seams. So this is something pretty common technique. I'm not sure if I've done it on the channel before. Basically, it's super glue and baking soda. I've seen people use baby powder actually, and you're just creating like it's almost like creating a bondo. So I just want to fill in these seams. They're very simple, straight seams, so I felt like I didn't have to do anything too complicated. And so you have the super glue, you have the baking soda in there, and then it creates like a hard paste. And then that sands very easily. And, you know, that's a great, easy solution. It dries right away. And I'm just going through and I'm filling up all the cracks. And there I have these sanding twigs, which come in really handy. Sanding twigs, sanding sticks. Every time I'm at the hobby shop, I always get like a handful. They're just good to have on hand. And now I'm just going through the grits of the sandpaper to sand down that line fill that I did. And now here I think I'm doing like a 220 because, you know, we're starting to prep this for paint. Going to be doing a little bit of bondo work in a moment. And, you know, it's just sanding, more sanding. You know, I vamp here during these videos. I'm just like, oh, we're sanding. But if you haven't caught on, you know, it's a lot of sanding. Even 3D printing. I mean, eventually maybe I'll get into resin printing. I think that might be less sanding, but I'm sure there's sanding involved in that. All right, so now I have this sort of heat sink. This is the only place where it joins where I really, really want to spend some time to make this seamless. You know, clearly it's red and black now, so you see that, but my goal is once I hit it with primer to not know that this was two pieces. So I have these needle files, and it's the same size as that groove. So again, I think that's pretty clean now. And you're only seeing the difference because it's red and black. So now I need to address where my print sort of came up a little. And what I'm doing here is I'm just taking tongue depressors, popsicle sticks, and I'm just making a barrier here where when I use my Bondo, that's just going to give me like a little shelf. So Bondo, right? You know, it's two parts. You put in the hardener, and then, you know, you probably have about 5 minutes to work. I've said this so many times on this channel that I'm not great with Bondo, and you would think by now I would be. So clearly, that's a mental thing that I need to get over. And note to self: be better at Bondo. Now, the 3D printing professor in the comments in another video said to try wood filler, and I'm going to try that next time. So now, you know, the Bondo off camera, that's hardened. Actually, you can do this in the same day. It's not like you need to leave it overnight. And now I'm removing the popsicle sticks, and I have my sort of filler there, where again, where it's different colors, you get to see, but, you know, once you hit it with primer, that'll all disappear. It's nice with this piece, and it's kind of by design that it's all just squares, so that way it makes it easier to work with. So now I'm just sanding the back down. I have a heavy grit sandpaper here. This is probably like a 80 or 100. And then, you know, just going through the grits, sanding. I think with this, you know, my final grit was a 220. But yeah, that, you know, that looks good. And, you know, Bondo dust everywhere. I think I need to somehow spend some time to make one of those tables that sucks out dust. But for now, we got a vacuum. Getting ready to primer. So what I like to do is after I 220 sand it, then I use a Scotch-Brite. Just because, you know, it's plastic, you want to make sure that the paint has a great chance to adhere to everything. And then typically I do a steel wool pass, and that to me is just sort of, if there's any hard to reach places, I think the steel wool grabs it. All right, so here's a filler primer, right? So that primer fills, it's really thick. And, you know, that's pretty good. And also the reason for that first filler primer is you're going to see where the Bondo had some issues, right? You're looking for little little scratches, pinholes, places maybe that you missed. So now I have this air putty. I'm just gonna fill this, and it's always a good idea to go through with Sharpie to sort of target your spots. Here I'm hitting it with a hairdryer just because, you know, I'm impatient, been working on this for a while, I want to get to finishing. And actually lots of times what I do with the hairdryer is just press that button where it's just cool air, but the air helps to get things moving around. So here's the 220, and with the air filler, you know, the spot putty, the idea is you want to get rid of most of it. You only want to leave it behind in the places where there was a little pinhole. So now I'm just sanding this this coat of primer just to get everything nice and smoothed out. And now I'm going to hit it with just a regular coat of primer. And I think at first I want my keys to be this color, but that primer is good. I'm in good shape. But then I realized, you know what? I just want to keep some things gray. So I have this metallic Tamiya color, which is really nice. I love the Tamiya spray paints. So that's my base coat. And you see there, yeah, that's looking good. Now it's exciting. Now it's starting to look like something. So now I'm going to do my first round of masking. I want to mask off that face part is the main part, and I want to do that. I've been painting things a lot lately with the off-white. You know, I wrongly call it like the Star Wars white, right? It's not white. It's more of like, it's probably more in the grays, but it reads as white. So I've mentioned this quite a few times before. You want to take the time to mask, right? Mask the whole thing off. So here I'm going to hit it with this white. And then in the 11th hour, I was like, oh, I want to leave those buttons silver. So off camera, I did that. There it is in my backyard. Lazy summer afternoon, spring, just drying. All right, so now the peel porn, always satisfying to take off the masking. And that's looking good. And you know, everything happens in phases for me. But right now, I'm a big fan of that off-white. It's just really cool. All right, so now just taking the masking off of my buttons. And now it's starting to look like a prop, you know? And, you know, because we know where that seam is, you can kind of see it in the heat sink sides, but I'm happy with that. So now I have this thin Tamiya masking tape, and just happy accident, it's exactly the gap between those keys. So that was not by design, that was just lucky, but sometimes you catch a break. If that wasn't the case, I would have just hand trimmed all those pieces and gone ahead. But, right, you take what you can get. So now masking this off, again, this is another thing that's I repeat, and it's worth repeating. You mask off the whole thing, because in the time it takes to mask the whole thing, if you miss a spot and it's some oversprays, it's going to take you forever to repaint everything, so it's worth it. So here, I'm just hitting these keys with gold, again, the Tamiya. And that's what's nice about, you know, keeping, you know, all these Tamiya paints I'm using for this are all cans where there's like an eighth of the can left from another project. And that's why it's worth it to save that stuff. You're not a hoarder. So that is looking good. Right now we're creeping up on it. Now it's the fun part. It's like, scratch your head, what next? Let me get out my nail polishes, and I got these little keys right here, and I'm thinking green, blue. Now this will seem like a throwaway thing, but it's actually something that I think about. It's like having this one red key is one of those silly things where it's like that pays dividends. Because it just, I don't know, it just subtextually, subconsciously adds a little something. So now I have rub and buff, gonna go over these L's. And what's gonna happen off camera here is the rub and buff I actually get on my faceplate there. And what I didn't film, I thought I did, is I just sprayed a little paint from that white into the cap and took a brush and cleaned that up. So now these fader knobs, I want to do like an anodized treatment on these, right? So again, masking, it's like the sanding, more sanding. Now with the painting, it's masking, and more masking. And again, I'm driving a lot of stuff home in this video. Mask it all off. You don't want to redo this. So the anodized treatment is 2 steps. First, you got to hit it with a base coat of a silver. So here I hit it with a base coat of a silver. That's because the anodized is like that candied translucent. So there's the silver. Again, hair dryer, because it's a small thing. I want to keep the train moving. And then there's the anodized blue. And, you know, I could have just painted it blue, but I've used the anodized enough where it does add a little something extra, and, you know, to me it was worth it. So now I'm going to hit the whole thing with a clear, because we're going to start doing our layering, our weathering. First thing I want to do, because, you know, this is a prop in my world, and my worlds are always very, very beat up. And actually, in this film that I'm working on, the place where they're stationed was at one point shut down. So there I did the brushing on those faders to just give them a little worn look. Now we got to hit it with another clear before we put on the final weathering, because we don't want to just make mud. Right? So now I'm just doing a sludge wash. I haven't done this in a while because I've been using those water-based oil paints a lot. And the sludge wash, again, it's well named. You're just sludging it all over. And then you wipe off the majority of it with a paper towel. And here is where my heat sink those side panels really come to life, right? Because then the black gets in there. And now I'm just gonna, I always just do like a few random like burnt sienna, just little touches, and you mostly rub those off. I tend to not go crazy with this because then you'll end up with it looks like a burnt sienna piece, and I don't want like a burnt sienna wash. And here, you know, if you follow my channel on the weapons, every once in a while I like to do the bloody hand. So here I'm doing the bloody finger. And on a keyboard, if you look at your keyboard, there's one key that's worn more than all the others, right? So I figured this one bloody key is the one that they pushed all the time when they were like, get me out of here. And then we put the final clear coat on that. And now the beauty shots. When you look at it like this, it looks a little over the top, but I say this all the time. These are props for films. You're never gonna like put this on the shelf and be like, oh, here's all my action figures and here's this space prop. No, this is meant to be in a film, in a series. But I'm very happy with that. That looks great, and I love that we made this from scratch. Oh, very cool. That is so cool. And you know, it's not unfamiliar, like I've made things like this before, but what's really cool is that we made this from scratch, right? And what I'm really excited about moving forward is that, right? So in my new film, in that universe, in that world, this logo means something, right? I won't get into all that now, but so it's cool. It's just those little details, you know. I'm inspired a lot by Aliens, right? With the Wayland Corp, right? So it's like, I want to do something like that, and now I'm able to, right? Whereas if I was, now I could also do a hybrid now, right? Like maybe I would go to the thrift store and get an old keyboard, get that, maybe get a piece of MDF, glue all this stuff on there, and then just print out that. Who knows? But for this, you know, I wanted to do a totally custom piece, and I think, you know, you get excited about something, your mind starts racing, and I think what I'm going to do with this is make maybe 5 different versions of this, and those will be different components that could be put together in different ways, and then I think we'll cast them, which is something we've never done on this channel yet. And then if we cast them, you know, I could have 5 different versions of this and maybe 10 of those. And so anytime I'm doing something, I use it for a set or a control panel or, you know, modular. Which, you know, if you look closely at, you know, like Star Wars, for example, there's a lot of that, right? Where it's like, we're just on the walls, there's that certain grid pattern. Consoles tend to have a certain look about them. So, oh, very excited. The Flashforge USACreator Max Dual Extruder 3D printer, awesome. So now, you know, we'll still do kit bashing and dollar store and mashups and Goodwill, but now and 3D printing. Well, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Love to read the comments, especially with this series. People with 3D printing experience giving some really great advice, some of that I've used already, and then people new like me who have questions about things that I could potentially explore. Check out the merch shop. We got the hats, shirts. Buying those really helps the channel. And remember, I'm just here to help make sci-fi.